guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Terry, and in this video I'm going to share with you guys some tips and tricks of how I got an 86 on my Hesi exam and how you can too. The Hesi exam is broken down into 7 parts. We have math, reading, vocab, and grammar, and those all have 55 questions. The bio, chem, and A&P have 30 questions. So the first section I started with was the reading passage. I chose to start with a reading passage because the last thing I want to do in an exam is wait till the end to read long, boring passages, and let alone to retain the information to answer the questions. So for this section, make sure you know how to identify the writer's purpose or tone. And in this section, one tip that I would recommend is to look closely at the writer's choice of words. And this will help give you like clues as to the tone of the passage. Also look for any unfamiliar words because they will give you context clues of how to identify the meaning. Also read each passages carefully. Look for the main idea in each passage, and then as you answer the question, if you need to, you can go back and find the main idea of the passage. The next section that I chose to do was the math section. Now the math section, make sure you know how to convert fractions to decimal. Make sure you know your order of operations. The order of operations was very big on the exam. Make sure you remember your PEMDAS, multiplications, divisions, additions, subtractions, and make sure you know that those are from left to right. Make sure you know how to multiply and divide fractions because that was a lot on the exam. Also, make sure you know how to convert like percentages from decimals to percentages and back and forth. Make sure you know your military time because there was quite a few questions on that. Also, make sure you know your Roman numerals. Make sure you know how to solve expression problems, and also practice your conversions from the metric systems as well as from the English system, whether it's from gallons to quarts and pounds to ounces. And once you know how to do that, you'll be fine in the math section. But the math section, I actually scored an 80. I was actually, surprised with my score. I thought I would score a little higher, but again, that's probably because I was getting a little tired towards the end. The next section that I chose to tackle was the vocab. In the vocabulary section, I actually scored the highest. The vocabulary section, I got a 96 on that section. For me, I usually watch TV with like the caption on. And so for me, what it actually does is like it helps me to identify really big words, and then later I'll go back and define them, and then I'll try to use them in a sentence. And then when I see them like on exams, I'm like, okay, yeah, I know that word. Or another trick that I would recommend is actually like dissect the word, break it apart into like the prefix, the root, and the suffix, and from there you dissect its individual meanings. So that really helped me in that section. The next section is grammar, and in this section, make sure you know the difference between there, and there. Make sure you know how to use Sarah and I and Sarah and me, when to use them. Make sure you know the types of sentences, the declarative sentences, imperative, explanatory sentence, and interrogative sentence. Make sure you know how to use a semicolon, a colon, when to use a comma, and make sure you just know how to use your punctuations. In the biology section is actually 30 questions. So this one I went through pretty quickly. Make sure you know the stages of prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase, and make sure you know what's going on in each of those stages. Make sure you know what proteins are made of, as well as the structures and the functions of a cell. For example, like the Golgi apparatus, the mitochondria. Make sure you know what takes place in them. Make sure you know the difference between a prokaryotic and a eukaryotic cell. So that was pretty like straightforward with the biology section. The chemistry section was another section that I scored really high on. That one, I got a 94 in that one. Make sure you know how to, you know, do stoichiometry, which is like how to like balance equations. Make sure you know like the orbitals, the s, p, d, and f orbitals. Make sure you know what a valence electrons are. Also, make sure you know the difference between an element and a compound. And let's see, make sure you know how to like, also again, conversions. Make sure you know how to convert between like a milligram to kilogram, and vice versa. And then moving on, the next section that I did, the last one, thank God, was anatomy and physiology. And that one was also straightforward. That one, make sure you know your medical terminologies. It's also great for that section to like make like flashcards. Make sure you know like, you know, superior, inferior, proximal, distal. Make sure you know the difference between the arteries and the veins. Also the function of each organs. Make sure you know the different types of tissues, you know, connective, muscular, epithelial, and nervous tissue. And, you know, one tip that I would definitely recommend is don't underestimate the test. Make sure you study, make sure you put in the work. One thing that I did do is that I took the pre-test just to assess where I was and identify my strengths and weaknesses. And from there, I was able to, you know, tackle the areas that were of concern for me. Also, I would recommend scoring higher than what your program, you know, requires you, just so that you can be more competitive, you know, a more competitive applicant going into the program. Yeah, and I think that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe below. Bye.